trying to hold the lead now, and with Rule going 0-2, he might be safe and good to go.
And it appears that the color that is absent from this list is white. So he's every color but. And he's going to be put to the test here very quickly by James Holcombe, who's playing Blue-White Heroic.
James with a favorite hoplite to start things off. Hoogland with a Yavimaya Coast, so his mana looks to be a little bit painful here. See if Holcombe can turn this favorite hoplite into something nasty. It's just going to be a boring attack for 1 thus far. This looks to be a Tranquil Cove, so this will move James up a little bit. This heroic deck picking up in popularity a little bit based off of Tom Ross's performance in Columbus a couple weeks back.
It's a very powerful deck. We've seen elements of it at the Block Pro Tour. The mana got a lot better with Flooded Strand. It's a very powerful, consistent deck.
James will draw. You see he does have a copy of Battlewise Hoplite in his hand. Temple of Enlightenment looks to be the land that he's going to play. Potentially. It looks like he's going to start by just attacking for 1, so that's going to work out just fine. There is a Temple. A little scry action here. Top card is a Plains. Going to consult the grip here. Looks like that's going to go away, so no interest in a 4th land.
And typically the decks that Jeff builds, because of their mana base and they're trying to play expensive stuff, typically struggle against really aggressive linear strategies. He normally has to cheat those kind of matchups, and there's 3 copies of Anger of the Gods in his main deck to that end. But I suspect this is going to be a tough matchup for Jeff.
Magma Jet's going to take care of Battlewise Hoplite. A little scry action, now time to draw a card. There's a 3rd land. This is a Creator's Clause. So get the heroic creatures off the table is what Jeff wants to do, and he's done that thus far.
Yeah, great opening here for Jeff, keeping the board contained. All he wants to do is get to a position where James runs out of threats, make it awkward for James to time his combat tricks correctly, and then Jeff can sweep it up with his creatures after the fact.
Seeker of the Way. Jeff untaps, draws a card. You see his graveyard. He's already got some red removal spells down there. Let's see what this is going to be. May have to take a little bit of damage. Here's an Anger of the Gods. God's Willing is going to keep that creature alive. Protection from red, of course. We'll scry here. Another God's Willing on top. And James wants to keep it that way.
And I like this setup here from James. It allows him to deploy Ordeal of Thassa this turn if he wants to. Leaves up the God's Willing.
2 mana, Ordeal of Thassa. I'm going to trigger Prowess and get across here for 3. Let's make it 4 now, actually, because of a counter from the Ordeal.
And now James's hand here. God's Willing, Feat of Resistance. It's going to be tough for Jeff.
Yeah, it's a Protect the Queen type game. 2 copies of God's Willing, Feat of Resistance, as you did mention. Don't let him get that thing off the table. That's the big strategy. And I think it's going to be pretty hard for Jeff to do, honestly.
He has to try to set up multiple spells in a turn that can play over the top here, and that's asking a lot.
Lightning Strike. No. Absolutely not. Time to scry. The top card is a Defiant Strike. James is going to leave that there. Let's see what this is going to be. It's the Satyr Wayfinder. Turn over a couple of cards here. There's a Murderous Cut, a Magma Jet, a Creator's Clause, and a Savage Knuckleblade. Those are all going to go to the bin. Shift and Reap before passing the turn back there for Jeff. And Defiant Strike was the draw.
So there's a pretty heavy delve element to Jeff's list here. Murderous Cut and Dig Through Time.
Sure. Use that graveyard as a resource. Feat of Resistance. Right now, it'll give it a 2nd counter. The attack will give it a 3rd counter. Also, this damage is going to come through unblocked. You have to assume that he named green with Feat of Resistance. So now 2 cards coming off the Ordeal trigger. Can happily cast Defiant Strike because he's drawn a land, which I think is going to happen. Yep, that'll trigger Prowess as well. So this is a lot of damage that's coming through here for James.
As you mentioned, he gets to play a land post-combat and be able to protect this with God's Willing, assuming Jeff can even kill this, which is an open question.
Yeah, it feels rather unlikely. You see the life totals change here. It's 33-5. Jeff will draw a card. There's a land.
I think Jeff's only long-term answer to this card at this point is Murderous Cut, which he does not have in hand, nor does he have black mana.
Yep. Yikes. These 4-color mana bases, they are not free.
I mean, the 3-color mana bases aren't free.
Yeah. Here's a Stormbreath Dragon.
Okay, well, protection from white is not bad here.
Not bad at all. Only one God's Willing in hand, too, so another Seeker is the draw. So can't just go God's Willing, kill you. That's not an option right now. So a bit of a roadblock here by Hoogland.
He can use the Defiant Strike and dig this turn if he wants to.
There's the attack. Stormbite Dragon, I don't think can block fast enough. Yeah.
Yep.
Just trying to feel you out.
Test the waters.
Absolutely.
See if you know the text on your cards.
There's a Seeker. Wants to play the island, slows down a touch. Pass the turn back. The problem here is that you take a look at James's life total, 33. Just got a long way to go.
Yeah.
Has so much life. There's Savage Knuckleblade. Looks like he's got to take a little bit of damage even to cast it, even though he has 6 lands in play. So it goes down to 4.
I believe that is Eidolon of Countless Battles that James has just picked up.
Yep, the big fella.
And James is in a position now where he can start trying to push even just to get Knuckleblade activations out of Jeff to block. Because even that's worth damage.
Yes, and kind of an awkward board state, but
yeah.
He's just got to figure out the way to get these last points of damage through. He's used a lot of his protection effects to get through, but you know, this is where a card like maybe Stratus Wall comes into play, or you know, Aqua's form. There are your blocks. No, I would be very hesitant to use those to use that last copy of God's Willing. I'm fine with a little Defiant Strike action, but I'm going to be a little careful, but he's going to use it now. Get protection from a color, that's going to resolve, trigger. Another copy of God's Willing on top. And it looks like James has some interest in doing something else this turn. I think he's going to go with a strike. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a bit of an operations error from James.
I'm inclined to agree.
He could have led off with the Defiant Strike if he knew he was going to make this attack anyway, because Jeff's blocks are forced.
Yep.
There's going to be no surprises here. And if you happen to find a second God's Willing,
Just kill him.
you actually have to kill. And now instead, James has to kind of finagle this board a little bit and hope that Jeff leaves himself in a spot where he only has one color of blocker back.
Just going to sacrifice his Wooded Foothills, go down to 3. Get a forest out of his deck. Might go down to 2 to pick up the Knuckleblade. We'll see. Yep. It's a painful game. When you're 4 colors, probably have to take some damage.
Well, now Jeff's in a position where he can at least cast the Knuckleblade without taking damage, because he's a mountain, a forest, and a bivouac. So that's a starting point.
Step in the right direction.
And he still has the Wayfinder back as a chump blocker as well.
Didn't get a great look at the draw, but in comes Opulent Palace. There's Knuckleblade.
And that's significant because now the Murderer's Cut that's been brought in Jeff's hand is online next turn, if he can get out of this.
Copy of Ordeal of Heliod is the draw. There's the Ordeal. Trigger Prowess. Attackers. A little counter action. Now here's God's Willing there. So preemptively casting that, I have to imagine on red, but again, it's not going to be a lethal attack.
Maybe he's naming green?
Yeah, does name green. Now Jeff gets to, yeah, he has to make this play, which is just basically block there and then chump block my Wayfinder and stay alive.
And now the God's Willing's out of the hand here. The Murderous Cut that Jeff's got going is great.
Yeah, see, the thing about God's Willing in this deck and Feat of Resistance as well is I like the way that James used them at the beginning of the game, but I don't like the way that he's used them in the later stages of the game. You know, he's got to use that as the way that he pushes through damage.
Yeah, the Defiant Strike play was where I think things got away from James a little bit there, because the opportunity was there for James just to do that first, see what was going on, And it turned out the top card of his deck was a God's Willing, and that would have been the kill. Now we've reached this spot where James is going to be left with nothing.
Yep. If this goes according to plan, and if you're Jeff, he's cast all 4 God's Willing this game. You know, if he's paid attention to that and it takes a look at the graveyard or something, he'll note that, okay, you've played all 4 of that card this game. So the green light is on if he has Murderous Cut in his hand and say, yeah, I'm just going to kill this. He's just going to delve 1 card. He wants to leave more cards in his graveyard. It looks like for maybe a card like Dig Through Time or Future Delve cards. But now he gets to go on the offensive and doesn't have to worry about a haste threat either from the Heroic deck. So we're turning the corner here all of a sudden. Hero of Iros is the draw. That's going to come into play. If you're Hoogland, you need to close the door as fast as you possibly can. Aqueous Form, Heliod's Pilgrim can come off the deck.
Yeah, that's the tough part about this is the amount of life that James has gained here means that Jeff is pretty far away from being able to win the game 2, maybe 3 turns. And there's a lot of draws here that James has that messes all this up.
There is a monstrosity activation on the Stormbreath Dragon. This will allow him to keep going. Might want to slow down just a touch, though. Can't just get in there with both creatures, leave himself dead on board.
Yeah, I mean, he's risking Singing Bell Strike, for example, if he attacks with one of his creatures.
Yeah, how does he want to attack here in this situation? I think that's the big question. Does he want to attack at all? I mean, you want to close the game out as fast as you can, and I'm okay with this attack. You know, does he lose Singing Bell Strike? Yes, he does. And there's some other cards he can lose through too, but I like making that attack. There's a Battle-Wise Hoplite. You have to try to get the game over with and fade some draws.
Absolutely. I mean, Jeff's hand can't protect him from the draws that really killed him at this point. So he's just got to do this.
There's Battle-Wise Hoplite. Now he might have to put the brakes on a little bit. Let's see what the follow-up's going to be. Eidolon of Countless Battles. He'll trigger here.
I believe this is going to result in a chump block here for Jeff's side of the table.
Yep, and there goes Knuckleblade.
Now facing 2 lethal attackers, so Jeff needs a big draw.
Well, he's reaching for mana, so it looks like it was big enough. Let's see what this is. It's a Courser. Take a look at the top card, Soul Tie Charm. Interesting. Land's going to come into play, trigger the Courser, go up to 3. Pass the turn back. But this is the kind of position that does favor James, I think. 2 mana actually only costs 1 because Hero's in play, but so you see Jeff's going to take a look at Eidolon of Countless Battles. You saw the Heroic trigger. Now, the question, of course, is do you put it on the hero and grow that so that you can draw the cards, or do you put it on the Battle-Wise Hoplite and take the opportunity to scry? James going with the option of putting it on the Hero of Iroha so that he can trigger the Ordeal and get 2 cards. So 1 and F2, Battle-Wise Hoplite, and it looks to be a Flooded Strand. And probably a pretty simple block here from Jeff, which is, hey, Stormbreath Dragon, do your job.
Well, he could hypothetically double block it, but I don't even think that, if he wanted to try to kill it, he could double block.
Sure. You see the count here. I want to see exactly what Eidolon of Countless Battles does. Just make sure that power, toughness, all that stuff. And I think Jeff says, I'm just going to block my Stormbreath Dragon.
Right.
So there's another Battle-Wise Hoplite, pass the turn back. Soul Tie Charm the draw, Stormbreath Dragon on top.
I mean, this is a pretty good set of draws here from Jeff.
Yep.
Soul Tie Charm with a lot of flexibility in this spot. And a second Stormbreath Dragon means he can play offense and defense.
All he can do is pass. Go James's way. James will draw another land. Not very helpful. You know Stormbreath Dragon will just block again, so really can't make a very good attack.
And at this stage, I don't think there's really anything to be gained from James making an attack. He may just have to say go.
I think both players in draw-go territory now. There's Soul Tie Charm. James wants to take a look. We will too. Destroy target monocolored creature. Destroy target artifact or enchantment with a naturalized effect, and then draw 2, discard 1. So at the very least, you use mode number 3. Get a little closer to Stormbreath Dragon, or you can kind of keep it in reserve.
I think the first 2 modes on this card are so flexible right now, and Jeff has all the mana that he needs to work with, that I think he's likely to just draw, cast the Stormbreath Dragon, maybe attack with the big one, maybe not, and just leave the Soul Tide Charm up as defense against James's board and a number of his draws.
Jeff's mana's a little all over the place, but if he has the ability to just leave Soul Tide Charm up, we'll see what happens. He just wants to cast it now to take care of the hero. Manic Influence is going to come in. Opulent Palace is now the draw. The use of that charm is a little bit aggressive. I mean, it's very scary, right? Because now he would have had the mana to leave up Soul Tide Charm. So if Aqua's Form comes off the top of the deck, or Heliod's Pilgrim, he's in trouble where he would have an answer to it otherwise.
I think that move there was too aggressive. The only incentive, really, to go ahead and do that is if you feel like your mana is going to be tied up. And it feels like Jeff has enough mana to operate with at this point. He, in fact, has enough mana to both monstrous Stormbreath Dragon and still leave up the Soul Tide Charm. He's at 10 mana right now, so.
There's Opulent Palace, trigger the course, you're up to 5. Satyr Wayfinder's the draw for next turn.
I also think Jeff needed to make an attack last turn. You know, the ground's pretty well locked up, and he just can't wait here. There's 4 copies or 3 copies of Heliod's Pilgrim, plus some effect that will make his creatures unable to block.
And Pilgrim comes off the top of the deck. A Monstrosity activation is going to deal James a little bit of damage. But here is Heliod's Pilgrim. I don't believe that finding Aqua's Form is going to be lethal at this point.
Well, he can put it on the Eidolon.
I take back what I just said.
Eidolon's pretty big.
Yeah, ignore everything I just said. That is going to do it. James Holcombe is going to win game number 1 here, drawing Heliod's Pilgrim over Jeff Hoogland. Heroic up a game over 4-color control, and it may have been a slight misuse of the Soul Tide Charm there.
I think that Jeff had enough mana to operate at that point where he could have just held it in his hand and basically leaned on its flexibility to cover a number of the draws that James had at that point. That Heliod's Pilgrim for Aqua's Form being one of them, and now we're on to game 2.
Take a look at the sideboards. 4-color controls where we'll start.
3 copies of Thoughtseize, 3 Magma Spray, 3 Disdainful Stroke, 4 copies of Goblin Rabblemaster, a Stubborn Denial, and 1 copy of Hero's Downfall. I really like just bringing in the extra counter spells here. Or sorry, excuse me, the cheap removal rather. I think the 3 copies of Magma Spray are great. I think the Hero's Downfall is a little inefficient and it's tough on just mana, but I would still want more removal spells. And other than that, not really a fan of Stubborn Denial or the Disdainful Strokes. Thoughtseizes, Rabble-Masters, they don't seem that good to me, so probably just the Downfall and the 3 Magma Sprays.
Other side of things for Heroic, I've got a Heliod's Pilgrim, 2 Laguna Band Trailblazer, a Seeker of the Way, Aqua's Form, an Ordeal of Heliod, 2 Ajani's Presence, 2 copies of Erase, 3 Stubborn Isle, and then 2 copies of Treasure Cruise. Tough to say where you go here. The one card that always interests me that's in the sideboard is just Aqua's Form. Excuse me. It's just really good, it seems like, in a lot of matchups.
So I like the Treasure Cruises here because Jeff's deck is a removal deck, so the game's going to go on for a long time, and drawing extra cards is really helpful in those sort of games. I like the Trailblazer here as well, just based on the cards that James saw. You saw Anger of the Gods game 1. You saw Magma Jet. It's safe to assume there's other red removal spells, and so something with a lot of toughness I think can be valuable. That card's probably typically for beatdown matchups where you want a blocker, and it's a really good thing to start loading up heroic triggers on. But I think here, given that Jeff's removal is base red, that card might come in here as well. I think the extra copy of Aqua's Form is legitimate here, and perhaps the Stubborn Denials as well.
So some decent options here for Holcombe. We'll see what he does want to sideboard in. As these players do sideboard and shuffle for game number 2, we will talk about season number 1 of 2015. It was announced a little while ago, but now we do have the commentators in place, and well,
look at us.
Well.
we're hanging out.
Whole lot of you.
Columbus, Philly, DC, and Indy to start off January. We move to some warmer environs as we move into February here with Houston, an open in Los Angeles, dry bowl for me. Your first open off in Baltimore, then Grand Prix Miami. You and I will be working that.
Yep.
And then we move to Dallas, where I will be working with Matthias, and the Season 1 Invitational in Richmond. This is basically replacing the Charlotte Invitational from Season 1 of last year. Will be me, you, and Matthias Hunt covering that event.
Going to be a lot of fun there in season number 1. We'll go over season 2 a little bit later today, but season 1 is good to go. The 2 weekends I will have off. When you're in Baltimore with Matthias, I will be in Mexico for the first time for my brother's wedding, and then when you're in Dallas, I will be in Cleveland for the Grand Prix, first one since 2002.
Pretty fun. I think through the end of May, I asked for 1 show off.
You're a monster.
So I'll be working nearly all of them.
You're an animal.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a lot of miles, even though you already do have a lot of miles.
Yep. already a Delta millionaire, but no reason that you can't be a Delta
You
billionaire.
own a plane.
Basically, after Mr. Delta, I'm the highest ranking guy over there.
You get to sit in the cockpit. Do you think his name is Mr. Delta?
No, it's not. It is not.
James gonna take a mulligan here. Looks like Jeff is doing the same. Excuse me, Mr. Delta.
Yeah.
I would like to fly one of your planes, please.
Direct flights to and from Hillsborough, New Jersey.
Yes. Landing somewhere in there. I don't know.
Cornfield.
Okay.
There's plenty of room.
It still is amazing. I don't ever think of New Jersey as like a cornfield or farming place at all.
It is.
Yeah, I just
The
never
Garden
think
State.
of it that way. Yeah,
It's called the Garden
I
State.
guess that does make sense. That does make sense. For whatever reason, I just associate New Jersey with New York so much, and I think of New York as just like, New York City, and that's just
Right.
all that New York is, which is clearly not true.
Well, so much of New Jersey is either basically a suburb of New York City or a suburb of Philadelphia. So there's a lot of that element. But if you get to the northern part of the state or the central part of the state, it is farm country.
Oh, both players going to draw up some hands here. Looks like Jeff is going to keep, as will James. We are underway here in game number 2, a Temple of Malice. Puts the top card to the bottom. For Holcombe Plains, favorite hoplite perhaps? Absolutely.
It looks like James has kept a hand without blue mana, and that is not uncommon for this sort of strategy.
Magma Spray is going to take care of that. Opulent Palace as well, so Jeff is getting his mana base online. Blue land does come rolling off the top. It'll come into play tapped there in Temple of Enlightenment, but blue mana is here. It's going to leave the card on top before passing the turn back over to Hoogland. Hoogland will draw a card.
And I imagine that means that there's a creature on top because James has to scry away any non-creature at this point. He just has all set up at this point.
It's a Courser of Crewface. What if Foothill's going to search up a forest? So there that is. You wanted a creature. I think you've got one. It is a Hero of Iros. We'll see Jeff's top card here from Courser in just a moment. It's a copy of Satyr Wayfinder. That'll be the draw for the turn. And now Temple of Epiphany.
Just all the lands.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of scry lands, a lot of tri lands. Fetches too. You can do a lot with your mana base in this format, as we found last week.
Guess how many different lands are registered on Jeff's deck list?
So I'm not allowed to look?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not total lands, but different individual lands.
13.
You are correct.
Yes.
It is 13.
I swear, I know you guys can't see this. I did not look. I just have a knack for these things. Been doing this magic thing for a little while. 13 is actually a pretty good guess. That's kind of insane. Satyr Wayfinder turns over a couple of cards. Bagman sprays the top card on the deck. Actually got that right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's 13. Jeff almost ran out of space on the deck registration sheet.
That'll happen. Bloodstained Mire's going to come in. Trigger. Little life gain. Pass the turn back. It's time to build a hero. Holcombe will draw a copy of Tranquil Cove. See the Defiant Strike and the Feeder Resistance. You have to assume if Jeff didn't kill it right away, he doesn't have an answer.
Yeah, you don't want to be playing at instant speed against this deck as much as you can avoid it because that plays into Feat of Resistance and God's Willing and such.
Ordeal. Only going to cost 1. Trigger. Yes. That's a 3/3 now. Attack step. Let's make it into a 4/4. Blocks pretty quick. Bye-bye Satyr Wayfinder. Trying to keep that life total high.
Yep. That
Pass turn
Wayfinder's
back.
not really doing anything else.
Nah, rarely does. Jeff draws a Magma Spray. Savage Knuckleblade, the top card of the deck. Perhaps some mana issues here for Jeff. Doesn't look like he has a ton of them.
Yeah, I mean, he's only got red, black, double green, and blue, so he's probably missing some colors, I would guess.
Just doesn't look like he has very many lands. Might still be in 1 land per turn territory. He's going to sacrifice the Bloodstained Mire. Get a mountain or a swamp out of the deck. There's a mountain. Yes.
And it's an interesting feature of the fetch lands in Standard compared to Modern or Legacy, where we're used to them basically being perfect mana fixers. In Standard, that isn't really the case. I mean, Wood of Foothills for your green-red monsters deck is great, of course, but once you start building these 3 and 4 color decks, it does not always find the mana that you're looking for.
Top card, Spray.
And these Magma Sprays now are of no help. I think they're his best sideboard card in the matchup It's great that he's found one of them early, but now the ship has sailed.
Yeah, they get bad fast.
Yeah.
I think he knows that he's in some trouble.
So the tough part about playing against Blue White Heroic is the straight removal effects like Soul Tide Charm and Hero's Downfall. They're often too slow, and the damage-based removal has a very short shelf life. So having the right mixture of removal is a challenge.
It's an attempt at a Soul Tide Charm. Pick any color you want, James.
That's not true. Don't pick blue. His ordeal.
All right, no,
falls
you're
on-
right. You're right. You're right. Okay. Good save. Good save.
Do not
pick blue. Pick black. Pick green. You can block. Oh, you can't. It's Creature's Tap. But just don't pick blue.
Just do not pick blue.
Do not pick blue.
Everything else is fine.
Temple Epiphany. Bye-bye Magma Spray. Now, so that's a card. That's a magic card.
It's a blocker. If Jeff gets an opportunity to block, it'll be pretty sweet.
Courser beats. James will draw. It's a Plains. Come on in. Trigger the ordeal. And a 1 and a 2. Battlewise Hotline Temple of Enlightenment will Defiant Strike action, force some more damage through.
This is another operations issue. I would have just led off with the Defiant Strike, I feel like, because if you find another ordeal, the upside this turn is so huge.
You get some crazy.
It's unlikely the 1 mana is going to really matter.
Another Temple, top card. Heliod's Pilgrim, or as Tom Ross likes to call it, the Stoneforge Mystic of Standard. Hey,
They are white 1/2s. They do search your deck.
his words, not mine. Boss knows better than me.
Far be it from me to critique the boss.
Absolutely. Anger of the Gods, top card now, of course, sir.
And I like some hyperbole myself. I'm not opposed, but
Hey, well, he proved it in Columbus. I give him that. There's Storm Breath. Pass the turn back. I think it's going to play some defense.
Stoneforge Mystic is most likely the greatest creature of all time, so we shouldn't be just throwing that comparison around all willy-nilly.
Perhaps. Let's see what version 2 of Stoneforge is going to search up here. Yeah. Jeff is just going to concede the game because he knows the top card of his deck. He knows that James is going to search up Aqueous Form, and there's nothing he can do about it.
Exactly.
Straight up.
He takes $1 million that turn and $1 million next turn, and that's going to do it.
Well, you start the game at 20, so it's hard to take $1 million twice.
Exactly. Twice. The second $1 million is really hard to beat.
James Holcombe going to win this match over Jeff Hoogland, 2-0. Heroic gets the job done over 4-color control, and it's the steady nature of the Heroic deck, I think, that really led to the match win there.
Well,
Jeff's mana base a little out all over the place.
It's